Hi there, I'm Katie Kaplan, an investigative journalist.
And I'm Em, a former special agent. And together we are thrilled to introduce you to our new true crime podcast, Two Sleuths.
Together, we are diving into a mix of solved and unsolved cases and looking at them through the lens of our investigative experiences.
So come check us out and listen to our 3-part series that dives into a modern-day Jack the Ripper case that no one seems to know about. In this series, we introduce you to the Butcher of Mons, and time is of the essence in this case, with only 4 years remaining to catch him.
Be on the forefront of that investigation and others by following us at Two Sleuths, available wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Sirens, a true crime podcast, brought to you by the Sirens Network. This podcast contains explicit content, so listener discretion is advised. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely the views of the hosts and do not reflect the views of affiliates, associates, or sponsors of this podcast. This is Sirens, a true crime podcast.
I know way too much about this, so
I hope you do.
I can talk,
I hope so.
forever.
Because I have questions.
If I'm too far in,
you
just
could never be.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
no. Here,
No.
you could
Okay.
never be.
Okay. Okay.
No, that's not a thing that's
Okay.
going to happen. Okay, well, obviously, we have a guest with us today.
Yes.
His name is Joe Johnston. I'm actually going to let you tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and happy to be talking about the case we're going to talk about today. I was born in Missouri. I grew up in Tulsa, and
That's how you know that he's from the South, Missouri.
Missouri. That's
it.
right. And had a couple of careers. I had a nice career in advertising, and I've been...
That's what we were going to talk about earlier.
Yes, we had a
We
question
saw you were
for
an ad man.
I'm so sorry, but we had one particular question.
It's just one little thing. Okay, I saw this on your website, and I didn't know if you were serious or not. The Happy Meal?
That's correct.
Wow! That's so
I
exciting.
apologize. Yes, I'll give you the 25 word or less version of that story. This was in a long time ago, and McDonald's was young, and it's hard to imagine it now, but kids didn't like their hamburgers because they were dry and flat, and kids didn't want to go to McDonald's. They had Ronald and the Hamburglar and all that stuff, but they really didn't know what to do with them, and they never did anything with them outside the store and advertising. So, their TV commercials and such. So, the parents of little kids are the best customers for McDonald's because they're on the go. They have stuff going all the time. They don't have time to cook. They need to feed a bunch of people cheap. And so we did some research, and we made one of the keys to this was making toys out of the packaging. We said put the hamburger in a box and print on the box so it becomes a toy, like a little truck. We had made several of them that made a train and so forth. Am I over 25 words? I guess I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just keep going.
we like it.
And then
It's fine.
we knew that somebody was going to object to grease on the packaging,
Right.
and say, well, you can't let your children play with all this greasy stuff.
Yeah.
And so we went through a process of computing the grease quotient of each item. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very scientific. Okay, so anyway, we came up with the idea that you do all this stuff, fun and games, puzzles and stuff for the kids, and put that together, and that'll help attract them to McDonald's. And we said, but it really doesn't work unless you put a toy in the package.
Yep.
And at the time, there was no way to buy those little toys.
Like individually?
Yes, in the quantity at the price that would make it work.
Okay.
Now, if you think about what was in Cracker Jacks,
Yes.
Yeah.
like a rub-off tattoo or you know, some little plastic something, that wasn't enough, for a meal at McDonald's. So it was only when McDonald's took it over and was able to buy toys made offshore in the billions.
Yeah.
They could get really cool toys and do movie tie-ins and all that. But I will say this, at the same time we were doing that, there were other people who had the same idea. And it actually came at McDonald's from, over a period of about 3 or 4 years, it came to them from about 3 different sources.
Wow.
And they gave it to an advertising agency in Kansas City to roll it out.
That is so
Wow.
wild. Kansas City.
I know.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
Love my Kansas City.
That is such a crazy, like, you've done so much stuff.
I know.
It's just some cool stuff.
Yes.
Like, we were talking about a little bit about your Nashville career. What did you do in Nashville?
Wrote songs and produced music,
That's so fun.
Wow.
published music.
Yeah, I had saw that you had worked with a bunch of cool people, Charlie Daniels and, was it The Chicks?
Oh,
The
yeah.
Chicks
Yeah.
and Vince,
Vince. Oh, my
Vince.
gosh, I love Vince.
Who's from Oklahoma?
the best
Yes.
Okie ever.
Yes.
Yes.
What were we going to ask about 8 seconds?
Yes. 8 seconds. That's a
She
well.
loves 8 seconds.
When she said that, I went, oh, because I've always liked.
I got bull riders in my family.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Actually, as a matter of fact, so when I started this podcast, I had just lost a cousin to homicide. And it's weird because he was actually named after Lane Frost. His name was Lane. So, yeah.
Wow.
And he was a bull rider, and they did all of that. Yeah.
I've always loved bull riding, and I went and kept up with him. I kept up with him. And so when they did 8 seconds, I was like, yes, they're doing 8. They're doing it. It's Oklahoma. They're doing it here. And so that was pretty cool for me. So when she told me that you did it, I was like, yes.
Worked on the music on it, right?
I had a song in it, wrote a song that was recorded by Mark Chestnut.
Oh,
I love Mark Chestnut. Which song was it?
Texas is bigger than it used to be.
Oh, my gosh.
oh, wow.
That's wild.
I know.
That's so wild. I feel it's such a small world sometimes. Okay, so when were you like, all right, enough of this. Let's go write some books, because you also wrote a bunch of books. You're like super into like Wild West sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm really interested in. I'm really a history writer, and I got really interested in vigilantism in the Old West, and wrote it. Part of it came about from a family story about a very distant relative of mine who was murdered in Missouri in 1883.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I need to get to the bottom of that because nobody in the family ever had. So I
Yeah.
started researching it, and I said, oh my gosh, this is a book. So I wrote a book, and it was published by the Missouri History Museum. Then the name of that book is The Mac Marsden Murder Mystery.
And that's the one I was like super interested in. I was like, I got to get that one.
Okay. It's really interesting. History Museum said, well, what else do you know about vigilantism? And so they did 2 more books. So it's a series. The first one is that specific case about Mac Marsden. The second one is called Necessary Evil, and it is a history, kind of a broad view of vigilantism in the Old West, mostly about Missouri, but it mostly happened in Missouri. It's unbelievable because of Missouri's status in the Civil War. It spawned this vigilante mentality in Missouri. And there were people from the north and people from the south all living there. There's an area east of Kansas City called Little Dixie.
Oh, yes.
And that kind of thinking just went on. So that's the second book. And then the third book is called It Ends Here, which is has a lot of Oklahoma in it because of a guy called the Oklahoma Kid and some other connections here in Oklahoma City. The guy here in Oklahoma, the guy who shot, see if I can get this right, the guy who killed Jesse James was killed by a guy who ended up being in Oklahoma. So
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So it was-
that was like a circular Jesse James kind of
Yeah.
book. Where like starts with Jesse James and then goes to another guy and another
I've
guy
gotta
and
get
all
that.
these murders and then back to Jesse James' assassination.
yeah.
Well, and I want to read all of those, but that one just really interests because I think I've told you before, my great grandpa I know him as Paul, but his name was Jesse James.
Hello.
Yeah. And he ran a gambling ring on the river from Oklahoma and Arkansas.
Oh, wow.
And all those big time guys used to come and gamble right there because the authorities couldn't get them because they were on that river.
That's scary.
Yeah, and so that's what he did. And my mom said he was the nicest guy she's ever met in her life. Like, he was just an incredible guy. But they went down there and they ran, and there were some big guys there. Like, I think Capone. I mean, some big, yes.
Wow.
And I told my mom, you need to write a book about this, from what he said. Of course, he's been gone a long time. Mm-hmm. But just interesting, because
I love history stuff.
all those guys were, kind of during that time you're talking about were down there.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
That's so wild. And you do have other books. I saw something about a cookbook or...
I wrote Grits to Glory,
Yeah.
How Southern Cooking Got So Good.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's
like the history of Southern cooking.
Yeah, there are no recipes in it. It's the history, why people in the South eat the stuff they eat, and
I need to.
how these
I
recipes.
need that one.
So, people up north eat chocolate and they eat cakes. In the South, we eat pies because fruit grows great in the South.
Yeah.
All kinds of fruit.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. And
The case that we're talking about today.
I have a new book, which I'm going to publish myself.
Oh, here we go.
And it's called I Didn't Kill That Kid. The subtitle is Art Fleek's Fight for Wayne Garrison.
And Art was his defense attorney.
His
right?
whole life.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, for like all the cases. I just read that, like all the cases, because there are 2 from his childhood and then, of course, the one later in life, which we'll get into. But yeah, I just think that's wild to be someone's defense attorney, like their entire life.
I know.
So we're going to do something a little different. Usually we're the ones telling the story, but today we're going to let you tell the story. So you tell it
Which is awesome, because
however
we get to
you see
kinda...
fit. It's going to be like a documentary, but in my own studio.
Okay.
And we might butt in every now and then with questions.
Please butt in. Please butt in. I'll just ramble here, and you just tell me when to shut up. Wayne Henry Garrison was born at Hillcrest Hospital, grew up here in Tulsa.
Hillcrest?
Wow.
Wow.
Went to...
My husband works in and out of Hillcrest. That's
Yeah.
My grandpa was born there.
See?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Very old hospital.
Yeah.
He went to Tulsa elementary schools and grew up on the north side. There was a chapter in our history, if you can imagine, the airport and the Gilcrease Expressway going across there. Before the Gilcrease Expressway, those were homes all in that area. So it took out a lot of homes, cut a lot of streets off, made dead ends out of them. So we're going to get back to that. But that's the area where he grew up. So he was born in 1959. Fast forward to 1989, he is married. He has a son. He owns a home on North Rockford, and he has a little car repair business, an auto shop called Choppers. He named it that because he wanted to modify cars. He wanted to customize cars, chop them and lower them and paint them and stuff. So he named the place Choppers. In 1989, that's his situation. There was a boy, a 14-year-old boy, missing in the neighborhood. And police started investigating this. He went missing on a Tuesday. And this boy is going to end up found dead. And Wayne Henry Garrison is now doing life without parole in an Oklahoma prison for that boy's murder. And he's been in prison for about 23 years.
Wow.
He's 63 years old, something like that.
That's so wild.
I mean, I'm rounding off there.
Sure.
So let me jump on down here. So this little boy is missing. He's from 14, but he looks probably 12. Looked young for his age.
I saw his picture.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Cute little guy.
Yeah.
kind of a modified mullet hairdo. He has huge front teeth and great big eyes and freckles. He lived 3 blocks from the outsider's house.
Oh,
We
that's
were
what we were
just
talking about. That.
It's so strange.
Wayne lived on Rockford. Coming down Rockford, coming south, he would go past this little kid's house, Justin Wiles, on the corner, the very next block. 2 more blocks, you turn left on Independence, and you pass the outsider's house, and then in that next block is his car repair shop.
Oh, wow.
So all of this
okay.
is within about 4 blocks.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's good to know because I didn't know. We're always asking questions like, okay, well, how far was his work from his home? You're answering
Well,
it
it does
all
make a
already.
difference when you're
It really does, especially in timeline.
timelines.
Yeah.
The little boy goes missing Tuesday night. The police start looking for him on Wednesday. Somebody calls the police. There's an anonymous call to the police and says, it's a male caller, and he says, you need to look at Wayne Henry Garrison. He lives 5 houses away from this kid. Well, the detective who got the call was a man named Van, and he knew who Wayne was, called Wayne and said, would you come downtown and answer some questions about a case we're working on? Wayne said, sure. So he drove downtown, answered some questions. Do you know this kid? Yeah, he hung around the shop. He's a neighborhood kid. He's missing. Do you know where he is? No. Haven't seen him since Tuesday. And they said, great, okay, you can go home. That was the end of that. On Friday, some fishermen found what they thought was the head of a mannequin floating in a little lake out south of Bixby called Lake Bixoma. And they poked at it with an oar, and they said, well, that's not even real. It doesn't even look real. And then the next day, there were some other fishermen at the lake. Saturday morning, they found what looked like some fingers sticking up out of the dirt, and sure enough, they were fingers, and they were connected to an arm. So they called police. Police came out. They found the head. They found a torso under a bright blue bright blue tarp held down by some rocks. And it was, of course, the body of Justin Wiles, this little 14-year-old boy. Most of his body. His legs were missing. His left arm was missing, and his genitals were missing.
That's horrific.
Yes.
I'm sure you're going to get to this. Did they eventually find everything or no?
They never found the rest of the body.
Oh my gosh.
They said, well, we need to talk to Wayne Garrison again. And we're thinking, why are they keying in on Wayne Garrison? Well, we're going to get back to that. So they went to his shop, to Choppers, said, do you mind if we ask you some questions about this? And he said, I want to talk to my lawyer first. And they totally ignored that and took pictures of him and searched his place and all that.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so we're going to...
Unauthorized.
Violating
Come
his
on.
rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, they took him downtown and questioned him again, and again turned him loose. They said, this is fine.
Okay, so they did search his home, though, even though it was unauthorized. Did they find anything?
They did not have a search warrant. They asked him, and he gave them permission. He said, you can search my home, you can search my business, take anything you want. He was totally cooperative. They searched both places. They took a slew of pictures. They took a shovel. I think they took a couple of knives from the kitchen, but they didn't find anything.
Like actually
That tied-
tying him to the
Nothing.
victim?
Nothing.
Wow, okay.
While this was going on, the Justin's stepfather found out that they were questioning Wayne. So he became convinced that Wayne did something to his son. He told a reporter. A reporter told the neighbors, and the neighbors started talking about it. And pretty soon the neighbors were in a frenzy. People were watching them through binoculars. Somebody followed Wayne's wife out of the neighborhood, right on her bumper for a couple of miles.
Wow.
Somebody broke into their house and stole a phone and something else, and a couple little things. So they were just terrified, and nobody would play with their kid. He stopped going to school.
That's sad.
And
That's
they
sad.
decided that they were going to have to move, which they did. They moved to North Carolina. They couldn't live in that neighborhood anymore. People threatened to lynch them. Everybody was talking about it. It was in the paper. The reporters loved it. Reporters were camped out in front of their house, trying to get a picture of them, trying to get an interview. And the police chief issued a statement that we've interviewed Mr. Garrison, and he is no longer a suspect. He is not a suspect in this case. Cleared. Didn't make any difference. In the public's mind, he was guilty. So Wayne and his wife and his little boy packed up everything they could get in their car and moved away to North Carolina.
That's what we're always talking about. There are more victims than just the victim.
Oh, yes.
No, that's totally right on. You're absolutely right. The fear and the list of victims are both pervasive. Well, after a little bit longer, this case goes completely cold. The cops have nothing. Fast forward now, we're going to jump up to 1999, 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Justin was killed in the summer of '89. We're going to jump up 10 years. Tulsa police arrest Wayne Garrison in North Carolina, extradite him, and bring him back and put him on trial for murdering Justin.
Wow.
He was convicted of the murder in 2001. He was sentenced to death. The conviction was appealed, and that was commuted to life without parole. So the question is, why Wayne? Why did all this focus on Wayne in the beginning, and why did Tulsa cops refuse to stop trying to make a case on him? Now I'm going to introduce you to his attorney, Art Fleek. Art is a native Tulsan also, went to the same schools that I did, and went to the same high school that Wayne and I did.
Oh,
we all went to Will Rogers High School.
Wow.
Art Fleek was a big football star. When the Will Rogers Ropers won the district football championship, he was all district. He was recruited by all the schools in the conference around here, which was the Big Eight. Now the Big 12. It was the Big Eight then. He was offered a scholarship to all those schools, and he chose OSU because they always got beat by OU, and he wanted to beat OU. So sure enough, they did. His first 2 years at Oklahoma State beat OU by 1 point each year. All thanks to Art Fleek.
That's awesome.
He was a big football star, and he could have gone pro, had no interest in that. He did spend a year as a coach at OSU, and then went to Tulsa Law School. Out of law school, he's looking for a job. And he found out that the county was wanting to hire a juvenile public defender. At the time, our juvenile justice center was a little one-story building that Fleek said looked like it had been designed by the same person who designed a brown paper bag.
Oh, man.
It was out in the river bottom right next to the levee, and it was actually surrounded on two sides by a car graveyard that was smashed cars.
Oh, wow.
So that's where the kids were
That's
taken
very
for juvenile
aesthetically
court.
pleasing.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the least hopeful places on the planet.
Yeah.
So he goes out there and applies for this job and gets hired. He's just a year out of law school, and he's hired as Tulsa County's first juvenile public defender.
Wow.
There has been a shift in our law enforcement in the state. We went from county prosecutors to district attorneys. Our first district attorney was S.M. Buddy Fallis. Buddy Fallis was a no-nonsense bulldog of a district attorney. The Brook Theater had just set attendance records for showing The Sound of Music for over a year.
Oh, wow.
Big deal. And then they brought in this dark European film called Blow Up, John Travolta, and it had a couple of naked seconds in it.
Uh-oh.
And some other kind of, So Buddy Fallis made them not allow anyone under 18 in the theater, and he made them edit the nude scene out.
What?
Yeah.
Wait. What's the point? of not having kids in there if we can't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. We want to
just
see.
saying.
We want to see that backside right there. So anyway,
I'm just saying.
so Buddy was cracking down on crime. That also at the same part of this restructuring, we got our first juvenile judge. His name was Joe Jennings, handsome guy in his 50s, with big black glasses. So here we had the county's first district attorney, the county's first juvenile judge, and the county's first juvenile public defender, all coming into their jobs about the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So Fleek's cases were kids who had maybe got caught with a little bit of weed. They stole some hubcaps. They shoplifted some cologne for their girlfriend.
Petty crimes.
Yeah, little stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they would get arrested, take them down to the juvenile center. Their parents come down there. They have a little hearing. They say, we're going to let you go on probation. They get along just fine. They come back and check in with the judge, and everybody's happy, you know. And sometimes the parents have been a little lax. They just need, it's a matter of shaping up the parents. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what Fleek's life was like until there was a kid missing in town, a little boy named Craig Brandon Neal, 5 years old, lived in the same neighborhood out by the airport, but Gilcrease Expressway was in by that time, and there was a tremendous search for him. Lasted a week.
Oh.
There were hundreds of people. The Tulsa World said there were 500 people in the field looking for him most of the time. We had volunteers on bicycles going through Mohawk Park. There were people all over the streets. There were mounted posse was out, with their cowboy hats and their mirrored sunglasses and squeaky saddles and all that. It was just, while the search is going on, the detective in charge of the search was Detective Van, and an anonymous call came into police headquarters and said, you need to look at Wayne Henry Garrison. He lives across the street from Craig Neal.
This sounds awful familiar.
And what year was this?
This was 73.
73. So it was quite a...
15 years before Justin Wiles.
Yeah, but that's so similar. Like an anonymous call that says you need to look at this guy. Come on.
That's so interesting. That would be that far spread apart. You would have another anonymous.
Like, who is this person that's like just following this kid around his whole life going, you got to look at that guy. That's just weird. There's one guy out there who was just peeping on him. Anyway.
Hang on to that
I'm
thought.
sorry.
Both of you keyed in on that immediately.
It's just weird.
Who did not key in on that?
Well.
Tulsa police.
We're like, well, sorry, Tulsa police.
Yeah.
You should have.
Yeah. Okay, so it turns out that Detective Van went to Craig's house. He lived, Wayne's house. He honestly did live diagonally across the street.
Wow.
And they found Craig Neal's body under the house.
Oh.
This little 5-year-old boy. There's even more to that story.
I already have thoughts. I do. My psychology's kicking in. I have thoughts already.
Let's pick this apart.
Detective Van already knew his name because 2 years before this,
Oh my gosh.
the night before Halloween,
So 1971.
Wayne had been spending the night with some cousins. A girl cousin who was older, I can't remember, 8 or 9 maybe, and a little bit toddler, 18 months, 2-year-old toddler. The next morning, he was home. He went back home. They found that little girl right away under her house.
And that was his cousin.
That was his cousin.
Oh, wow. I did not realize that was his cousin.
Wow.
So Detective Van was on that case. He knew Wayne. Everybody in Tulsa, all the police, of course, knew Wayne from the connection to that case. So here he is that he's killed Craig Neal 2 years later. When Wayne killed the little girl. Of course, Buddy Fallis tried to get him declared an adult.
How old was he at the
He
time?
was only 11.
Oh,
Oh.
wow. I have no
Whoa.
words for that.
And nobody was going to hear of that.
No.
Whoa.
You know, the judge said, look, he's a kid. And here's the thing. At the age of 11, Wayne was something like, 5'6" and weighed 120 or 30
So
pounds.
he was physically
he was
mature.
a huge guy,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he just didn't know how to play with anybody,
Yeah.
especially somebody small like that. So he,
Socially awkward?
very socially
Okay.
awkward.
Yeah.
There's a categorization of a juvenile at that time called a neglected child, and he was declared a neglected child and sent to the state reformatory. Is it
Griffin Memorial. I actually did an counseling internship when in my master's degree there.
Well, they had Wayne, and of course he went back and forth between just detention and going to the hospital. Got a lot of study, psychiatric treatment. They sent him home for 3 home visits, and the 4th visit that he went home, he killed the little girl. The first 3 visits went fine.
So he was already in and out of
Right,
getting mental help
right,
when this happened.
right.
Wow.
And was there a lot of discord? You know, you said you kind of came from was there a lot of discord in the family? A lot of...
Boy, I'll say.
Okay.
Oh man.
But nobody really knew what his home was like.
So it was kind of...
You know, at the time, kids placed in foster care, in a foster home, you couldn't talk about adoption.
Oh, wow.
The goal was always to reunite the kid with
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
So that's why they kept trying to send Wayne back to his family and make that okay, and it never was okay.
Yeah.
The case, by the way, is in Fleek's hands, and Wayne is now 13. They're trying to declare him an adult and try him as an adult for murder, to get him convicted for life, possibly executed. We don't know. You know, Art Fleek convinced him. He said, you know, this kid can be saved. We need to send him back and let him finish the work that they're doing, and he can be saved. And he convinced him, and Judge Jennings sent him back.
To Griffin Memorial.
Yeah.
And I don't know if a lot of people know about Griffin Memorial, but I mean, it was not a joke. I mean, if you went there were a lot of people there. I mean, a lot of adults there. I don't know how they kept the children away from the adults, but I could imagine that if you were a child, you know, 13 or 11, 12, 13, and you were sent there, a lot of those people would probably scare you. I mean,
Yeah,
you would
that's probably
be
scary.
scared of
In his case, he was probably somewhat scared to be home. So, did he ever admit to killing these children?
He signed a confession.
Oh.
And it's the kind of
Signed
confession where
coerced.
Let me set the narrative, and you just tell me that, oh, yeah, that's what happened.
put the words in his mouth.
Yeah.
We actually
Yeah.
see that a lot
So
with cases.
what
A
happened
lot,
next? What happened next? Did this happen? Did this happen? Did this happen?
That's leading.
Well, and that's one thing I'll tell you. I was a school counselor, and that's one thing we were always told not to do.
Yeah.
I was taught this over at Griffin Memorial, you know, at the Oklahoma County Mental Health Center. Do not lead,
Yeah.
because children have big imaginations, and they'll just tell you whatever you go with.
Yep. How did they determine that these kids died?
You know, Fleek's big point about this is they were playing. You know, they're playing like kids play. And he's a big, over 100-pound guy.
Yeah.
When he killed Craig Neal, he was bigger. He was 5'8" and something like 145 pounds. She was strangled. They were both strangled.
Okay.
So in Craig's case, there was a rope, and he had the rope around his neck and was swinging him around.
Oh, my
So,
gosh.
so he loved little kids. He played with little kids all the time, but there were always other people around. In both
Yeah,
of these cases, he was
adults
alone.
Wow.
Now, does he have siblings?
Oh yeah,
There's lots of siblings. So there were other children in the home.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So Fleek has saved his life at this point. He goes back to state detention, and when he gets out, this is important to remember. When he turns 18, they turn him loose. Poof, that's it. There's no safety net. There's nothing, no program.
We see that a lot.
Now, today, it's all changed. It's all different. I mean, they are really...
They follow them, and yes.
Yeah.
But then there was nothing. You're 18, you're grown up, and he has a hearing before a judge, and the judge said, you know, Wayne, for your sake and other people's, you really should get some additional continue your counseling.
But they never checked in on that.
Well, how's he going to do that? He's
I mean,
18.
yeah.
He has nobody. He's
Where do I go?
And it
what do I
costs
do?
money.
And
it costs
resources.
money.
Yeah.
Who does he know? He doesn't know.
That's
So-
why it's important to provide resources.
Well, and 18-year-olds, I know from having my own child that they don't reach out. If I tell her to call someone like OSU, because that's, call OSU, get your classes, it is like I have told her that the world is on fire and, and she's got to run the other way because it's like an anxiety, especially 18. You're not going to call a counselor and go, I need you to be my,
Yeah.
there might be some, but I don't know any.
Especially if you don't know what questions you're supposed to be
No.
asking, what you're even there for. Like, what?
No.
How can you possibly rely on a child, basically,
Yeah.
to follow up on any of that?
Interestingly now, remember this, he's been getting all this counseling. Psychologists have been all over him for 2 years, 5 years by that point. He basically spent his whole teen years in detention. And at that hearing, when he was 18 and turned loose, they all came in and testified. He's neurotic, but he's not psychotic. Wayne is not mentally ill.
Okay. So he was never medicated. They never put him on anything. They just
probably did in Griffin Memorial.
I'm sure they did while
Yeah,
he was there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fleek has saved his life. He's 18. He's been discharged from state custody. And he moves back in with his family, which is not a good place for anybody. And he is living in Rogers High School district, and they won't let him in. So he calls Fleek and he says, hey, I'm out. And Fleek knew he was out because he'd read about it in the paper. And he says, what are you going to do? And he says, oh, maybe I'll get a GED. And he said, well, why don't you go to high school? He said, well, they won't let me in. Well, Fleek blew his stack. And Fleek went and picked him up and took him to the high school. And they walked in and met with the dean of boys. And Fleek said, I understand that Wayne can't be admitted to classes. And the dean of boys said, well, we can't take a chance with that sort of thing. And Fleek said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, he has a record. Fleek said, if he has a juvenile record, it is sealed.
Boom.
He
I was
has-
about to say that.
He has no record. A juvenile has no record. So, he didn't want him there because he killed 2 kids when he was a kid
I mean,
himself.
I understand, but the legalities of it,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to know about it. It's as if it didn't happen. So you can't, legally you can't keep him out of school.
Well, you can't, but
You can't, but
they have little ways around saying this. We don't have, this. We're full. We're at capacity.
Manny was also a school counselor, by the way.
and they'll find a way to move you somewhere else.
Yeah.
if they really want to.
Yeah.
Well, this is late 70s, and Fleek pointed out to the dean, you have a responsibility to every child in this district to give them an education. That includes Wayne. If you don't want to do that, I'm going to call the Tulsa World and KOTV, and we're going to file a lawsuit this morning for $1 million. And when we win, not only will your career be over, but Wayne will have $1 million, and he won't need an education.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, go Fleek. So Wayne gets into his classes. The dean stood outside and watched him pass classes and glared at him and warned him every day of his life. And still Wayne persisted. He graduated. He went to Oklahoma State Tech to study. They had automotive repair classes at Rogers, and he loved it. So he went to Oklahoma State Tech, drove down to Okmulgee 3 days a week to take classes, put himself through Oklahoma State Tech. By that time, he had a job at a car shop here doing body work. They said he was an artist at body repair. So he saved up his money. He bought a set of manuals on how to repair almost every car, and then he rented his shop called Choppers. He designed the sign and painted it himself.
Wow.
He happened to be in the bank and talking to a cute little curly-headed woman teller, and mentioned that he liked working on old Studebakers. And she said, that's funny, I have an old Studebaker. Oh. Well, a match made in heaven. Wayne and Beth started talking about old Studebakers. They ended up marrying and having the baby John.
Wow.
And he... So in the course, by the time he was 28, from the time he was 18 until he was 23, he had really put his life together.
I mean, that sounds like somebody who was trying to be a contributing member of society.
Meanwhile, the police had totally blown the investigation into Justin Wiles' case. They never investigated anybody but Wayne because of his history. They were sure that he killed Justin Wiles, the 14-year-old neighborhood boy. They never took DNA from any other person.
What?
Now, I'm going to refer to one of your favorite cases, An Innocent Man.
Here we go.
The Innocent Man by John Grisham, which happened in our hometown of Ada.
Good old Ada.
And
Hi, Ada.
Just for comparison, in that case, they had dozens of videotaped interviews with suspects. Mm-hmm. They had over 40 DNA samples of over 30 people that were all sent to the Oklahoma State Crime Bureau, Bureau of Investigation. In the Justin Wiles murder case, they sent only Wayne's DNA.
That's so strange.
Nobody to compare it to, except Justin.
That's very strange.
Just as, this is whose.
Because you see, like, Ada is so small compared to, like, the resources that they would have had here versus there. You would think it's like, no, that's our guy.
It looks like
let's
they
just not do anything else.
Wanted to close it.
And the difference in years, even, DNA had progressed, was it 7 years, I believe?
It wasn't long.
Between the Ada case and Wayne's case in 89, DNA was on a fast track.
Yeah.
People could tell it was going to be a big deal, so they should have been working with DNA.
Yeah.
So Tulsa really dropped the ball on that.
Well, we've seen cases. I've actually seen cases back to the 50s and 60s where they were collecting DNA. They had no idea that they were going to be able to use it.
They just collected it.
They just collected it to collect it. They thought, maybe someday we'll figure out how to use this, but so that's wild.
Interesting on that point, there was not one videotape interview in Tulsa.
Wow.
This is 1989.
That's strange.
Yeah, no videotape. Only they did audio cassettes.
I mean, that's one thing, but it's way better to have video.
They have videotape of Ted Bundy.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
So, I mean, you can't have videotape
like
of...
the 70s, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
That's, okay, it seems like we're not doing things on purpose is what it seems to me.
Well, a lot of the police just had tunnel vision. They wanted Wayne off the street. And there were a lot of people that felt like the juvenile court dropped the ball. They should have made him an adult and put him in prison for life for the 2 childhood killings. My book spends a lot of time on the trial, which I'm not going to do here.
Sure. Okay, that's fine.
But I can
because
tell you,
we want people to read your book. So.
You can ask about the trial if you want, but it was not good. Fleek offered dozens of objections and motions and tried to get things thrown out and was just overruled constantly. He made 12 motions to the court in one day all denied.
Wow.
So when you read that, it just doesn't stack up to be a good carriage of justice.
The one thing I did want to touch on slightly with the trial was that it was mostly just circumstantial evidence.
It was 100% circumstantial. They don't know where Justin Wiles died.
Right.
They don't know how he died.
Right.
There is not one piece of evidence tying Wayne Henry Garrison to the murder of Justin Wiles.
Right.
In fact, the trial was held in Tulsa. There's no evidence that he was killed in Tulsa.
Right.
His body was found in a different county.
Right.
And that was one of the motions. You can't try this in Tulsa. It has to be tried out there, but that was denied.
Yeah.
Police have been building this case for 10 years. And so Wayne gets arrested and Fleet gets the case. Well, he's got all this 10 years of data to catch up on. Meanwhile, everybody who knew Wayne well and everybody who was around Wayne at that time is already dead by the time we have the trial.
Of course.
So there's not much way to build a case.
Like, as in probably his alibis?
Yeah, yeah.
All
So
dead and gone?
what we do know is that Wayne and a couple of hangers-on were at Choppers at the shop. Justin came around looking for work. He wanted to make some money to buy a ticket to go see the new Batman movie. He hung around the shop. That was Monday. He was back on Tuesday. Same guys, same three guys, and Justin. They went to the store. They got some supplies for the shop. They picked up some Kentucky Fried Chicken, came back and ate it. The three guys never could agree on which day Justin went with them to get food and go to the store, and which day one of the days he stayed at the shop and while they went. Anyway, they came back. Wayne closed the shop about 2 o'clock. And the one guy left. The other guy left and saw Justin getting into Wayne's car, and then he pulled away. So that was the last time Justin was seen by those two guys. Wayne says he took Justin home, did some other things. Nobody knows when he died.
Right, because he wasn't found for 4 days.
He was last seen Tuesday afternoon. The head was found Friday. So he was killed between Tuesday afternoon and Thursday night. Here's the thing. This is Wayne's week, okay? Well, nobody knew this at the time. There's a lot of stuff that you can't bring up because nobody knows it except Wayne. And if you're Art Fleek, you don't dare put Wayne on the witness stand. He'd make a terrible witness. He has no emotions.
Right.
And he will just appear to be...
or social cues or what he's supposed to... Yeah,
he'll be a terrible witness. But that week, they were having a lot of financial trouble in their marriage, Wayne and Beth. She was unhappy about some other things, and she wanted a divorce. We don't know what's behind all that. We just know she wanted a divorce. She was going to go visit her dad in Pennsylvania, take little John with her, think about it, make her final decision about the divorce. Get this. They'd been married at that point for 6 years, I think. They had never been apart one night in their marriage.
Wow.
And Wayne is totally freaked. He begged her. They had a terrible fight, and he just begged her not to go. But the plane tickets were bought, and so she went. So here he is, the first time he's ever been alone since they got married. So he's freaking out. Justin goes missing Tuesday. Okay, one of these days, the police detective Van says, would you come downtown and answer questions? Which he does. The next day, Thursday, the fire marshal shows up and says, we have a complaint about a wiring violation.
At his shop?
In the shop, in Choppers. And he sees it over his shoulder. It's an extension cord. And he says, you can't do that. So he writes him a citation and closes the shop. So his wife leaves. He gets questioned in this missing child. The fire marshal shows up and closes his shop. He can't afford to hire an electrician, and he can't do any work because the shop is closed.
That's a lot of bad things.
A lot of stuff going on in his life.
A lot of stress.
And so the police come back to the shop. they come back and they take pictures of Wayne in the shop and then take him downtown and take some more pictures of him.
But why? Why are they taking pictures of him? Just
Well,
trying to see if he has anything.
Funny you should ask that. As they're going back through this 10-year-old case, trying to make a case against Wayne, they come across a picture that was taken of his arm, and there are 2 marks on the inside of his right arm. They're maybe 3/8 of an inch long and like a sloppy equal sign. There's 2 marks. Wayne thought, they asked him, how did you get those marks? 4 days before Justin went missing, Wayne's brother, Paul, came into the shop and tried to whack him over the head with an entrenching tool, which is a shovel that folds over. It's a military thing. Everybody in the Army used to get one. Has a locking ring so it can be straight like a shovel or it can be at a 90-degree angle like an axe.
Oh, wow.
And he had it locked like an axe, and he came in and tried to beat Wayne over the head with it. And Wayne is, the brother's left-handed. Wayne was right-handed. So when the brother swung it left-handed, Wayne put up his right hand to block the blows. He said, I assume that's what that is. He had a wound in his head from the attack.
Wow.
This all stemmed from the fact that the brother was doing some work in the shop for him. And Wayne caught him stealing the solvents to sell to huffers, people who sniff fumes. And caught him sniffing them himself, and caught him selling weed in the shop.
Oh,
so
wow.
He fired him, and he said, you'll get paid when I get paid for the work that you didn't finish.
Wow.
So the brother was mad, and he came back.
Well, you know what? Good on him, though, for, even though it's his brother, good on him for firing him.
I have a question. Was the brother spending the night his little cousin was murdered?
Here we go.
The little girl who was killed?
His little cousin
Her name was Dana Dean.
Dana Dean. Was there anyone else spending the night, like his siblings, besides him over there?
Her older sister. She slept in the same room with her older sister.
Okay. Was any of his siblings there?
No.
Just him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wayne was staying at their house.
I saw where you're going with that.
Slept in the living room. The 2 girls slept in their bedroom, and the parents were in their bedroom.
Well, that's actually not where I was going.
You don't know where I think you were going.
That's not where I was going.
Okay. Now, let's get to the, so he was convicted on 100% circumstantial evidence. And, you know, there is this old thing about, well, it has to be beyond any reasonable doubt. Mm-hmm. That is not the standard anymore. There's a new standard based on an Oklahoma case called the Spuler Standard. Y'all know about that. Okay. And Wayne was convicted with that. And the judge in this case gave the jury orders that are right in line with that. That, you know, you just have to think that anybody reasonably looking at this would think that he did it.
Yep.
The prisons are full of people convicted on circumstantial evidence.
I know because we have no body convictions here. I know that for a fact. It's like there's no body, there's not even any blood. This person just went missing, but this person gets convicted for it. And you're like, how the heck did that happen?
I wanted to speak to the 2 marks on the arm. The police decided those were put there by Justin's teeth biting his attacker.
Oh.
What?
That was the basis of their case. That was the basis of their arrest warrant, of their extradition. And so they went to find an expert to testify to that. So to do that, they had to measure Justin's jaw.
I know where you're going with this.
Justin has been in the ground for 10 years. So they exhumed Justin, and his teeth fall out.
Oh, my God.
So they glue his teeth back in.
No, they did not.
They take a mold of his teeth.
After they glued it in and not know exactly if it's that. Oh.
And
I'm sorry, my jaw is literally on the floor.
This
All
is
right, Tulsa, we're having some issues
And
here.
then you're going to tell me about a odontologist and bite mark evidence, which we all know is just junk science.
Dr. Kriz.
Oh, here we go.
Dr. Kriz, you probably know Dr. Kriz.
My God.
So he's brought in as the expert. He glues the teeth in. He makes a mold. And what does he do with the mold? He mounts them on a pair of vice grip pliers. And then he has a lady from his office come in, and he bites her with the teeth, the mold of the teeth in the vice grip pliers, and takes photographs of that and compares that to the photographs of Wayne's arm taken 10 years earlier.
Did they even do that on the same part of the body?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, on the forearm.
That doesn't
inside
even
there.
matter, because compared to, I'm sure, who was probably a small woman, compared to him, which was a very large man, it would not matter. You would have to literally have someone who is exactly his same stature, build, muscle density, thick skin thickness. Like, it's just junk. I'm sorry. It's just junk.
It's absolutely junk science and has been widely discredited since then. Even then, it was discredited. And Fleek had a great expert, was sick and didn't get a chance to testify. In the middle of the trial, when he testified, it was all done. It was the last day of the trial, and he was the only witness. So that was sad.
Of course. That's how it goes.
Okay, so I'm going to jump into the appeal right
Okay.
now. The appeals attorneys really worked hard on this. They interviewed a lot of people and got some leads, which I'll touch on. But the big thing they did is they brought in a psychologist. And this psychologist spent something like 13 hours with Wayne.
Oh, wow.
It was really good. Then he also interviewed some of the same people who had worked with him at State Hospital and had all their reports that they had written.
Oh, wow.
And the thing is that Wayne would tell stories about his childhood, and people tended not to believe him, not because he was lying, but because it was so outlandish.
Really?
And people would just, it was hard to believe. But he told the same stories
The exact same way
in
every time?
1971, 73, and 89, and 99.
The truth doesn't change.
He told the same stories.
Yeah, so that means he was telling the truth.
That's exactly what this psychologist says. He is telling the truth. This really happened.
Yeah.
And I'm going to broad brush this, and you can ask questions if you want, but
Okay.
I'm going to give you, his mother was an alcoholic and drug addict.
And was probably doing drugs and alcohol when she was pregnant with him.
Probably.
And led to some little bit of fetal alcohol syndrome.
I'll bet that's right. Absolutely. Now, when he was, she tried to give herself an abortion multiple times and failed.
Oh, my goodness.
When he was born, she tried to suffocate him with her hand, and she would hold his mouth and nose closed until he stopped breathing. And then she would be mad when he woke up and would slap him. So he probably had some traumatic brain injury.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
that would explain a lot of his apathy.
A lot.
Because you would have
Depending on how many times she did this to him.
you'd have some oxygen, cut off.
Deprivation.
Yeah, and so
Absolutely.
especially if he had a little bit of fetal alcohol syndrome, that causes apathy.
Ooh.
Oh, Lord.
Apathy. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't 3. He was 18 months old, I believe. Her mother lives here in town. Minnie Sperry is her mother. She takes him over to her mother's house, and Minnie Sperry is sitting there holding the baby on the couch, and she says, "You love him, don't you?" Minnie Sperry says, "I sure do." And she says, "Good, you keep him, because if you don't, I'm going to drown him." And she walked out. So Minnie Sperry raised Wayne. Now, Minnie had several children, and apparently some of them had fine lives, grew up and had families and so forth. She had 2 sons that never left. One of them was brain damaged in a car wreck.
Oh.
Really badly. Never could function as an adult. The other one was diagnosed psychotic, schizophrenic, before he got out of high school.
Oh. Wow.
So both of them were committed to state institutions off and on over the years, and then they would come back to live with her. And she would have to, the one who was brain damaged, she would have to remind him to eat and bathe and that kind of thing. The other one would fly into terrible fits of temper, and she was no pushover, so she would fight right back at him, and the family said that she usually won.
So she was
Wow.
Wayne's mom's mother.
Yes.
Okay. Those are her siblings, his mother's siblings.
Yeah. So his mother abandoned him. Wayne had an older brother, Paul. There was a middle brother, Johnny Ray, and a sister along in there, and I know very little about the sister, and I've kind of left her out of my narrative.
Same mom,
Same mom.
different dad, or same dad?
Those three children had the same dad.
Okay.
Wayne was a bastard and was told
That's why she
his
didn't want him.
his
Okay.
entire life that he was a bastard child.
So that's why she didn't. Okay.
And nobody loves him and nobody wants him.
That's so sad. And Paul, the brother Paul, is the one who supposedly attacked him.
That is
right?
correct.
Okay.
The older brother. Okay.
I saw that in the appeal.
Paul's 9 years older.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
wow.
quite a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny Ray, the middle brother, was very close to Wayne. Fed him and played with him. He was also afraid of Paul. They were both afraid of Paul and his friends, who were very rough. At some point, the psychotic, schizophrenic uncle at Minnie's house started raping Wayne. We think this was around the age of 4. Paul almost had to see this at some point or be aware of it at some point. Paul had a violent homosexual relationship with at least one of his friends, and they raped Wayne at some point,
So his own
starting
brother.
around the same age. They did things like putting airplane glue in a paper bag and putting it over his head and taping it around his neck. Johnny Ray rescued him from that. They duct taped him and put him in a laundry hamper, and he kicked his way out of it and cut himself badly and was put in the hospital because of loss of blood. They threw him off a railroad trestle, and he had a number of broken bones and internal injuries that put him in the
gosh.
hospital.
It's a
Wayne-
wonder he didn't die from any of that.
He could have died many times. His mother encouraged him to poke his playmate's eyes out with a stick
What?
and hit chickens and dogs and cats. And
Did he still see his mom some? Did she?
Yeah.
She would come over.
yeah,
and-
interestingly, at one point she left the family, and the stepfather at that point dumped the 3 chosen kids in with Minnie.
Oh, wow.
Another time, they all
So just nothing was ever stable for him.
nothing stable.
Ever.
Everything changed. Minnie Sperry never knew how many people were going to be living in her house. It was a
wild.
2-bedroom house with a basement with a mattress on the floor.
Gosh.
The at one point they all moved in with Minnie. So there were Minnie, the 2 uncles, Wayne, 3 children, and the mother and stepfather. All of them in this 2-bedroom house with a basement.
Absolutely no routine. Absolutely terrified of everyone in your life that you're supposed to trust. And there's a good chance that that's where he stopped developing because of all the trauma.
that mindset, and that's caused from trauma. I mean, you stay
Yeah.
in that because you can't cope any other way.
And you can absolutely see where now when he is playing with other children, he has never been played with.
Right.
He's only ever been attacked.
Or he's been played with extremely inappropriately,
Everybody in the family was rough.
and that's normal behavior to him.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yeah.
know how to play board games,
I mean,
fun
because
games, ball games, anything like that. Everything was rough.
I even tell my kid he's only 2, but he whacks the cat, and I'm like, no, be easy, and I'll show him how to do it. It sounds like no one ever said the word easy to him, or that will hurt, or anything like that.
Well, they taught him that violence was
Yes,
a normal, and that's what you did. And he probably thought that, people would overwhelm him with violence, and so that's kind of how you kept your stance in the family. Because if you weren't violent, then you couldn't survive.
You really have an understanding of this.
Yeah.
Let me tell you this. When he was 9 years old, he was almost saved. The principal at the school, the thing that did it was he had art skill. And the principal was impressed that he did such tremendous artwork, but he had no friends, no activities, didn't relate to teachers or kids, anybody well. And he asked the counselor to take a look at him. So guess what the counselor did? Asked Minnie Sperry to come in.
Uh-oh.
She didn't look at Wayne at all. She looked at Minnie Sperry, and Minnie Sperry was pissed. She was really mad because she had to come in.
Of course, inconvenience.
She said there's nothing wrong with him. Has he ever been in the hospital? No. Is there any violence in the home? No. Any abuse in the home? No. He's fine. And that was the end of it.
Well, and that was the counselor's first mistake, because if you have any thoughts that it could be the parents, by law, you do not have to tell the parents.
Yeah.
You can seek help for them if you feel like they're in danger of their family home, and you don't have to call the parents.
I wonder if that was the same, though.
Back then, who knows?
In the 70s.
I don't know.
I mean, everything was wild in the 70s.
It was. There's a fella who went to school with Art Fleek and I, who happened to be an administrator in the juvenile system at the same time, Ted Hanner. And Ted Hanner told me that all those rules were in effect. If a social worker saw a gun in a home, for example, or a person who could be a bad influence on that child or a danger to that child, the counselor could remove that child immediately or order that person out of the home immediately. And he said it just didn't happen back then.
So that was in effect, but no one did it.
Right.
No one practiced it.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's good to know.
Well, and that's lack of training for our counselors, and back then and even a lot of times now, they have education degrees. They don't have counseling degrees. And so you see a difference in that, because they don't really know where those boundaries and perimeters that they need to really study are, and they need to know where that boundary is, where they should not contact the family, and they need to protect that child. Because if you're contacting the parent that did this to the child,
well, now they're just going to go home and beat the crap out of them for giving them up.
There's probably a lack of training there.
Okay, here's another thing. While Wayne was in state detention, while he's in state detention for the killing of Dana Dean, and before Craig Neal has been killed. He's going home for these visits. His mother does not go to pick him up for the home visit. She sends Brother Paul to get him. At this point, Wayne is 12 and Paul is 20 or 21.
Early 20s.
Oh my gosh, by that point, Paul has already been to Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Whoa.
And was blown off a tank, had PTSD, had injuries, and basically had been doing a series of drugs ever since then.
Which caused him probably to be further violent.
Oh, yeah.
Even more violent. So,
especially if you are just coming back from something where that was normal. Violence is normal for the last 3-4 years of your life, however long you were over there. Yeah.
So, they have a Volkswagen Beetle. They drive that over there, which, by the way, happens to be the same car that Art Fleek drives.
Beetles were really popular in the 70s.
I have a Volkswagen. I love my Volkswagen.
There you go. Okay, so Brother Paul is about 20, I guess, and Wayne is 21 and 12. And Minnie Sperry gets in the back seat of the Volkswagen because Wayne can't get back there. And they go to Oklahoma City, they pick him up and bring him back. While he was in detention, while Wayne was in state detention, the middle brother, Johnny Ray, died.
Oh.
And nobody from the family came to tell him or visit him or anything. Just somebody at the state hospital came and told him, your brother's dead.
The only one that he was close to.
Yeah, the one he was close to, the one who protected him from Paul, rescued him from the laundry hamper. And
how did he pass?
Well, while they're driving home, Paul tells him, he says, guess what, man? They found Johnny Ray's bones in this burned out house. He had already been dead for months, there's nothing left of him but his bones. So he's telling him this while they're driving. He takes him to the house to show him where it is. It was out on 11th Street in an abandoned house. Backing up to when that body was found, Johnny Ray had been missing from the house for a couple of months. And nobody missed him. Nobody cared. You know, the mother didn't care. Nobody cared, except Minnie Sperry. And Minnie Sperry kept trying to get Paul to take her to look for Johnny Ray. His car was missing, and Paul wouldn't take her. But after he'd been missing for, I believe it was 4 months, a call came in to police, an anonymous call.
You're killing me with the anonymous calls.
Came into the police and said, there's a burned out house. There's a skeleton in the closet. It's a kid who died of a drug overdose.
Well, how do they know that? Who is
Paul.
this?
They know
Listen.
this because of Paul. Because Paul is the one who's
I
calling
know, that's
all
what I'm
this.
saying. Like, Paul, come on, Paul.
Come on, Paul. Okay,
Ridiculous.
so there are 3 anonymous calls. There's only one person who would have known the information connected to all 3 of those. Now, they could have been 3 different people, but there's one person who knows
About all of them.
about all 3 of them, and that's Paul. Can we talk about the alternative killers?
Yes.
He admitted putting them under the house,
Okay.
and he didn't admit to killing them. He admitted to playing with them.
See,
Okay.
that's
And he says they were, you know, he wasn't breathing, she wasn't breathing, he didn't move, she didn't move. So he put them under the house because he knew he'd done something bad.
Okay. But with this other little boy that was 14, that's a completely different MO, completely different.
He doesn't fit the mode of a serial killer.
No.
Not-
And this fits the
no.
mode of a serial killer.
Yeah.
This
Well-
this little boy.
Now, I will say that he does not fit. Wayne Henry Garrison does not fit this killing to me.
A hedonistic.
Well, it's just completely
a hedonistic
different.
Satanist fits that killing.
It's
I was
just
just
completely
saying.
different.
Oh, George Kent Wallace, he lived in Fort Smith. He was accused of some murders in North Carolina, North Carolina or South,
North Carolina.
and moved to Fort Smith and was suspected in murders there. They looked at him for Justin's case.
I'm just saying his MO, because he would lure children. He had 2 confirmed kills, a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old, and he would lure them in by just finding a random teenage boy, claiming that he was a police officer and they did something wrong and he's going to put him under arrest, put him in his car, drive them out to bodies of water. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, they all involved bodies of water.
And kill them. And he did not kill them the same way every time. The luring, the bodies of water, the stuff like that, that's what I think of this MO would fit better.
But a lot of people are probably going to say he did that because his life was spiraling out of control, and that was his.
I feel like at that point he probably would have, and this, I don't know, you're the psychologist here, but I feel like he probably would have considered suicide before he would have done something like that at that point in his life.
He had considered suicide before. When he was in high school, he went to pick up, he had never had a date in his life, and everybody was talking about the prom, and he got the nerve to ask a girl to the prom. And she said yes. And he went to pick her up. Her dad answers the door with a gun in his hand and said, my daughter's not going anywhere with you. So he went out to Keystone Lake, thought about killing himself, and instead he called Fleek about 3 o'clock in the morning. And Art Fleek saved his life for the second time, really.
See, I'm just saying, like, at that point.
There's another thing that shows that he was rehabilitated. And I didn't mention this, but I'll just mention it briefly. While they're living in North Carolina, there was a neighbor boy who ran away from home, and Wayne had been friends with him. He loved children. He was friends with kids. He was never a pedophile, never accused of being a
It's like
pedophile.
Michael
of any
Jackson
kind.
mentality.
A Michael Jackson
Yeah.
kind of, yes, exactly. He just loved, because his childhood
Because
was
his
stolen
childhood was
from
taken.
him.
Right. Yeah.
And so he loved being around kids. And this neighbor boy considered him a friend, came to him and nobody knew where the boy was except Wayne. If Wayne and the wife, the boy was at school, the wife was at work, Wayne was alone with this kid. If he wanted to kill a kid, there was
Perfect
a
opportunity.
little 13-year-old boy right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, too, is that about the two children, that's another mentality that I don't see in a lot of murderers, serial killers, especially serial killers. If they kill children when they're a child, a lot of times, Ted Bundy excluded, a lot of times you'll see that the mentality of their victim also ages with them.
Well, yeah, and again, the BTK killer is a perfect example of that. When he came back to kill his last victim, she was a lot older because he had gotten a lot older.
Right. And so, to me, if he were to kill someone later at this point in his life, it would probably be someone around the same age as him.
Well, it's all about who you feel like you can control.
Right.
And if you're getting older and you're not on your game anymore, you're not going to feel like you can control someone that's young and healthy like you could in the past.
I don't know if we're going to get to this or not, but I did read in the appeal a little part in there that said that this body, they described it as being dismembered, and they described the blade, and that it was, how they described was precise.
Surgical precision.
Surgical precision. And that part is the part where I was like, okay, hold on a second. Because we're talking about a kid that never would have even for like first response, never had anything to do with any of that. So how would he all of a sudden know how to surgically dismember a body?
Let's talk about alternative killers. Okay. Now, you have to understand that in the trial, Art Fleek can't develop all this. He doesn't have time. He's got to get ready for trial. So he can't investigate all these people and get witnesses and get stories and find out who really looks guilty and who doesn't. But I'm going to give you a list here. The two guys that hung out at the shop, they were there the afternoon that Justin disappeared.
Which, by the way, I just want to throw out, their stories changed over the years.
Well, that's part of the deal. 10 years went by. And as I describe these guys in the book, these are guys who didn't have regular jobs. They picked up odd jobs. He didn't have a job at all.
Were they drifters?
Wiebring, not his real name, Wiebring was from Missouri and was here in town, 18 years old, didn't have a job. He stayed part of the time with a girlfriend named Charlotte, and part of the time with a man named Ray, who he described to police as his foster father.
Okay.
Go figure. The other guy was Larson, not his real name. Larson was, depending on who he was talking to, he was either a butcher working at this grocery store or telling police, oh, I'm just studying to be a butcher. I'm not really there yet.
Let's look into him immediately.
Did he own a big set of professional knives? Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay.
Come on.
The FBI was in this case, and they identified him as a person of interest. And they specifically told Tulsa police to look at him. One of the things that police operated on was that they think that the killer had help. It was not a one-person job. And number two, the body was moved in a pickup truck because of the cleanup.
Well, yeah, there would be blood in a car.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to clean up in a pickup truck.
Well, and if you're a butcher, you would know. You put it in the back of your truck, you can spray that down, move on with your life.
Larson's father had a pickup truck. Wayne, let's talk about Wayne's automobiles. He has a garage where he works on cars. His car is a 1964 Chevrolet, white interior, pristine, fully restored Cherry, like it came out of the factory, lowered.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just like it came out of the factory.
Because he's a car guy.
Car guy.
He's not going to put blood in his
he
car if
is
he's
not
a car
going to
guy.
put, no.
Exactly. Furthermore, police searched it. Police found one thumbprint of Justin on the window. inside.
But we knew that he hung out with them.
Everybody knew he rode in the car.
Right.
That's the only car that he had running at the time. Okay, his wife had a different car.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's move on down the list. Justin had a stepbrother. Justin's stepbrother was 16, already had a drug record, and didn't have a job, and was sometimes at the house and sometimes not. So he was never investigated. Should have been. There was a guy who lived in the outsider's house named Paul Priest. Paul Priest is still living. He's on the streets of Tulsa, has had many restraining orders against him, a lot of domestic assaults, and he lived in the outsiders at that time, and he operated a little garage, a little car repair business, unlicensed, in the garage behind his house, which was almost exactly across the street from Chopper's.
So if, a kid was looking for work, wouldn't he just walk across the street?
He definitely knew Justin.
Yeah.
There was another guy in the neighborhood named Jerry Koss, Kaase. Jerry was a druggie, a male prostitute, and had been to jail. He was arrested for theft, which was a violation of his parole in another county, so he was sent back to prison. Police never fully investigated. Now,
so there's like a laundry list of people.
It is a laundry list, and there's even more, because don't mean to victim blame. No, the cops never looked at Justin as a child at risk, and he was a child at risk.
Oh, absolutely. I was actually going to ask Manny to talk about the victimology of it, because when you're out there on the streets hustling for money, like, that's just part of it. You are now living an at-risk lifestyle.
Well, you're not victim blaming at all, because there's a difference between saying this is your fault, this happened because you were doing this. No matter where you are, what you're doing, it is never your fault. You could be running naked in downtown Dallas, and it is not your fault if someone approaches you. But there are things that we put ourselves at risk for. I tell...
Not being aware of your surroundings.
Not being aware of your surroundings, going places at night, you shouldn't go. I mean, just things like that. I mean, we have a responsibility to protect our own bodies. And when you're young like that, you're not going to probably fully be aware. And if you're not taught, and you don't come from, an ethical family or community that shows you how to be safe.
And lifts up your safety.
You're not probably going to practice that.
Yeah. Okay, this is weird. It reminds me of, like, it's like a sixth sense. You do have to be taught it, but it's like, okay, you watch a scary movie, right? You don't know it's a scary movie yet, but then they show the big haunted house, and it's like nighttime, there's fog coming up from the ground, and some guy goes to this other guy, let's go check that out. Okay, somewhere in you, someone has instilled the fear that that's not a good idea.
Well, it's our own defense mechanism.
And the ones who die in the movie are the ones who go into the house.
Well,
anyway,
we have it regardless. We have our defense mechanism regardless of who's told us what. We make a lot of our serotonin in our gut. So when you say that gut feeling, you do have that. That is scientifically correct.
Yeah.
And so we will have a feeling, no matter who's told us what, that, okay, something's off about this. Now, if you don't have the knowledge to follow what to do to get to safety, you're probably going to ignore it.
Right. And we see a lot now. They say, the statistics now for abductions like this of children is like 75% domestic. They probably know that person. In the 70s.
Or came across them at some point.
In the 70s and 80s and even the 50s and 60s, stranger danger was a real thing.
Oh, the Stranger Danger video is the best video ever made. And if no one's watched it, you should completely watch it. I made my daughter watch it every time.
Well, and it's because predators, they knew that no one was teaching their kids this stuff.
It's old, but John Walsh made it. I recommend it. It's just a great video.
Like, if this case had happened this year, I'd be like, well, you need to be looking at the family.
Yeah. They definitely did not
Yeah.
look at the family enough. Now, at the trial, Fleek told his co-counsel, he says, we don't have time or the resources to develop all these people.
Mm-hmm.
But the best suspect is the stepfather, whose name was Billy Don Douglas, not his real name. But he is still living. He is still on Facebook and posting
Wow.
angry, terrible stuff on Facebook. He's had a lot of arrests. He has he's lived with and been married to a series of women, had restraining orders from several women,
That tells me a lot.
kicked one wife out of a moving vehicle, hated Justin, and beat him regularly, and all the kids in the neighborhood knew it.
So he didn't want to be home.
He didn't want to be home.
Yeah.
Justin's routine, this was during the summer, of course, school's out. His routine was he would leave the house about 11. Nobody was home except the sister, and there was a baby. I forgot to mention that. So we've got the sister, the baby.
A lot of stress. A
yeah.
lot of family dynamics there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The stepbrother may or may not be there.
Mm-hmm.
The mother goes to work every day. She has a real job. He works.
She the breadwinner.
Yeah.
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 The stepfather takes jobs when he can get them and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
He works in bars and things. Sold dope out of the house. He was a weed dealer. Paul Priest, the guy. Oh, it's Jerry Priest. I have that Paul Priest. It's Jerry Priest. I'm sorry. Jerry Priest was one of the guys who told cops that he bought weed from Wayne's stepfather.
Oh, so they knew each other.
They knew each other.
And Jerry had a garage.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Bum, bum, bum.
Dun-dun-dun. Now, Justin was a paint sniffer, and paint sniffers sniff glue and anything they can get a hold of, all kinds of,
Huffing.
huffing. He was a huffing. And his mother and stepsister both, when they told police about it, they laughed about it. They thought it was, a teenage thing. At that time, it was legal for kids to buy spray paint. So they would do that. Huffing spray paint can kill you. It can be fatal. So no
Huffing
one
anything
knows.
can be fatal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No one knows how Justin died. He could have died from breathing paint fumes. He was on the street with known dopers, and we know that he was not afraid to jump in the car with adults and not know where they were going, not tell anybody where he was going with them. Anybody could have offered him any kind of drugs at any point that might have resulted in an overdose.
I know they didn't have a full body, but did they do any sort of autopsy at all? Like tox screen?
There was no toxicology report, and they did not even know the contents of his stomach.
What? How is that? Oh my God.
The autopsy, Justin's autopsy, was done by I've forgotten this woman's title, but it was not the medical examiner. And at the trial, the medical examiner testified, not the woman who did the autopsy.
What? How is
That
that?
shouldn't even be legal. That should have been thrown out.
How is that even possible?
But as you know, they've recovered toxins out of mummies.
Oh, yeah.
And all kinds of
yeah.
ancient
Yeah.
The skin tissue would hold
Well,
that.
remains. Yeah.
I think if he was killed and, didn't die, I think it was sexually motivated.
Could very well have been. We know that several of these people in the neighborhood, this Jerry Koss was a male prostitute. He lived in a house with another man and woman where she was a known prostitute and so forth. Let me tell you something else. We bring one of the two hangers-on at the shop that day that Justin disappeared. We left town the next day. Justin disappeared Tuesday afternoon. Jumped on his motorcycle and went to visit his parents in Missouri on Wednesday. He came back, said hello to his girlfriend, said, I'm leaving. He and Ray went to California the next day.
Yeah, that's very
What?
suspicious. How long were they in California?
Long time.
Oh,
And when
Well.
they went to the home of Wiebring's cousins there. When police tracked him down, he was already gone. And when they asked him to call in, a few days later he called in, would not tell them where he was or give them a phone number where he was.
Wow.
He was later interviewed by a policeman in California who said he didn't think he was being truthful. In two different interviews, he said, I left town because that kid was missing and they were looking at Wayne for it. And in the other interview, he said, it was just a coincidence. It had nothing to do with, I just happened to leave town at that time. Now,
Yeah, that's suspicious.
guess who else left town the same day, Thursday, the same day that Wiebring left for California? Brother Paul.
Mm-hmm.
did he know Wiebring?
One of the most interesting things, that's really good that you ask that. Police knew Wiebring as a hanger-on at the shop when this first happened. Okay, 10 years later, when they revisit the case, they interview Wiebring again, and he admits that he knew Paul before he knew Wayne.
Oh, wow.
Wiebring's girlfriend, Charlotte, is the daughter of Paul's girlfriend, Sandy, who was later his wife. So Wiebring knew Paul. He said, I've got this friend who has a car that I need some work. I can do this on this guy's car, but I need a place to work and I need some tools. And he says, oh, my brother has this little shop. He'll let you work. So Wiebring goes over and says, Paul said that you might let me do this. And so that's how all that triangle worked out, is that Paul introduced Wiebring to Wayne.
As a journalist, do you ever get tired of doing the job for cops?
Well,
I feel like
it happens a lot.
We've been here for a couple of hours, and we got some pretty good leads. That
Okay,
I
let me
feel like.
let me wrap up a couple of things, if I may. A couple of little things. The way Wayne tells it is that his brother Paul framed him, killed Justin, framed him for the murder.
That's what he says?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I believe it.
Yeah, I
If-
kind of do too.
If you want to frame Wayne for this murder, what's the best place to put that body? At his shop? No, that's stupid. Wayne's not going to do that. At his house?
Yeah.
Under his house? No. You put it at the lake where Wayne likes to go fishing.
Yeah.
Okay, the body was not hidden. It could have been hidden anywhere. It could have been
Right.
buried. It could have been weighted down in
We
the
know
bottom
that
of the
he
lake.
likes to hide bodies. We know that as a fact of his
Because
psychology.
he put the body under the
But twice.
Yeah.
Not just once, but twice.
But
I
this
mean-
body was put in three places.
Right.
The head was attached to a rock, but it was on a 6-foot string in 5 foot of water, so it wouldn't sink.
But he wanted to make sure it didn't move.
The fingers were sticking out of the dirt. It was in the middle of a circle of
That's
rocks
ominous.
with a log laid out across it and another stick stuck in the ground. So somebody wanted the arm.
They wanted it found.
The torso was under a blue tarp held down with rocks.
And I'm going to guess that the genitals and legs were kept as a memento.
Souvenir.
Probably, yeah.
Funny you should mention
Trophy.
that. Paul was fascinated that in Vietnam he had seen people collecting genitals from dead soldiers, drying them and varnishing them and making necklaces out of them. He was fascinated with that and talked about it a lot.
Gosh.
This is the last thing, and then I'm going to shut up here.
We're enjoying
We got
this.
all the time in the world.
This is the last thing that I got from Wayne. Oh, I left out one other thing. Okay, I have two other things. Then I'll shut
it's
up.
fine.
I can't wait to read this book.
I
I'm
know.
so excited about
Okay,
reading
so
this
while
book.
Justin's out running around the street with all these drug dealers, the day after he disappeared, there's a little restaurant out by Lake Bixoma, and everybody in there on Tuesday afternoon at exactly the time when Justin was supposed to be disappearing, people saw a boy that they thought was probably 11 or 12 years old, had long hair, and was hard of hearing. Justin was hard of hearing. And he was with a man who had long hair in the back, but balding in the front, and had a little mustache. That's a perfect description of either his stepfather or Brother Paul.
Wow.
And police never found the mystery man at the cafe.
Interesting.
Although everybody in there saw him. And then, of course, 10 years later, everybody who was in there was dead, except for Danny Beck. Danny Beck was a local TV personality. And he,
I was going to say, I remember that name.
Yeah, I know that whole. I was like, that name sounds familiar.
Okay. Now, the other thing I was going to say, and this is the last I have from Wayne. Paul confessed to 2 people that he killed Justin Wiles. Paul and Wayne's sister had a son named Jeffrey, and Jeffrey was a bicycle rider. He liked to ride over to Uncle Paul's house and get stoned. Paul liked to pick up teenage boys in his red Mustang and bring them to his house and get them stoned and have sex with them.
Wow.
And one of the days, one of the kids he picked up was Justin. And we know that he knows Justin because Wayne caught him selling weed to Justin in Choppers. Although he told police he had never met Justin, didn't have any idea who he was. But after all this came down, he told Jeffrey that he got Justin up there. And, of course, Paul is buzzing and telling this story to Jeffrey. And he says the sex just got out of hand and he killed him. So Jeffrey, by that time, is terrified. Jeffrey runs off. And who does Jeffrey tell? Minnie Sperry. He rides his bike to Minnie Sperry's house, tells her, she calls Paul, tells him to get over there. Paul comes over, and he confesses the same thing to her. And she said, you go tell the police. You have to turn yourself in to police. Okay, what happens in the next 10 years is, number one, Jeffrey gets hit on his bicycle and killed. So he can't testify against Paul. He's dead. Minnie Sperry then gives Paul a deadline. If you don't turn yourself into police by the new year, I'm going to turn you in. Wayne is convinced that Paul threw her down in a violent fit and broke her hip. She died of a broken hip on December 31st.
So we're talking about a lot of other people in this mix that have died too.
Now, while the appeals attorneys in 2001 are going around interviewing everybody, trying to do a little investigation, Sandy, Paul's wife, won't talk to him very much. They give her an interview. And Paul refused to talk to him, but he knows that the appeals attorneys are going around and talking to everybody. He knows they're closing in on him. Paul kills himself in 2002 with a pistol 6 months after Wayne's conviction.
I have literally no words.
It sounds like he found the perfect alibi for his sexual hedonistic rage and thought, oh, what a better way to get rid of Wayne, because he was supposed to do all what he was mad at him about and hit him about was the money paying him. So I'll just pin this on him.
So,
and he had Weavering clean it up.
And/or Larson.
And/or Larson, yeah.
I have a question because we know that they got into a physical fight because of the. Okay,
there was no question about the entrenching tool attack. Paul admitted that.
Right. Okay. So my question is, how long did that take place before Justin went missing?
I'm going to get the days mixed up here. I can't remember the exact number of days, but I mean,
because he still had the marks right when they came by and took pictures of him.
It was about a week, and during that week, Paul was telling everybody that he was going to get Wayne. He was still furious about it. He said he was going to get him because Wayne filed charges. He filed assault charges against him. So he carried the entrenching tool with him. He had a sheath knife on his belt. Told Minnie Sperry, Weavering, Larson, told everybody he saw, I'm going to get my brother for this. And Wayne took out a restraining order, and the next day, that was Monday, Wayne took out a restraining order that was served. Wow. And the next day, Justin disappeared.
I'm telling you,
man, and
that's not a coincidence.
No, that's his motive right there.
I'm telling you.
say, even though he said it went too far and he killed him, I want to say I think it was very planned.
I'm telling, for sure he's the one that called. Every time I'm telling you, he's the one that called. A lot of people like this part, so I'm going to read this part from the appeal. This is just where they found the placement of the body parts, because it's a little gruesome. However, as you said, the rest of it wasn't found. So, just be careful when you're out at Lake Bixhoma. I'm just warning you now. It is very dense. I've never actually been to Lake Bixhoma. I did look it up though, and it's around it is very wooded and very dense, wooded. And also there's no telling what could have happened to those other parts. Could be there somewhere. Maybe he was expecting them all to be found. Mm-hmm. Maybe not. Who knows? But straight from the appeal. So after being reported missing from his home June 20th, 1989, 4 days later, the right hand and arm are discovered in the mud on the bank of Lake Bixhoma, and his dismembered torso was discovered 0.2 of a mile away from that portion of the body. Then they find his head, his arms, his legs, and his genitalia had been dissected post-mortem. Again, they describe it as precise cuts through the soft tissue by a sharp instrument. His head was eventually found floating in the water with a rock tied to his jaw with a wire. But also, I feel like this sounds planned to me.
No, the whole thing sounds
planned. The whole thing sounds planned.
But the one thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around is, where was the body dissected?
Here's the lake. Yes, and that's what I want to know as well.
Because I don't think they would have drove back to the neighborhood or the area and done that and then drove all the way back. I don't think that would be quite the...
No, I mean, I feel like it would have been done in or around the same location.
But if someone saw them...
But look how, this is cafe. So dense. Look how dense this is.
Yeah, but I don't buy that they're going to do that out in the truck.
Wayne was a fisherman, but he was not an outdoorsman. I can't imagine him tromping off into the woods with those parts. But even if somebody, Wayne or anybody else, did that, those 3 pieces of the body were meant to be found.
Yes, I
mean, there were people all over that lake during the summer. There are picnic tables and fishermen. Wayne and Paul have an uncle who lives in Bixby, or I think he lived in Bixby, and he owned a red Mustang, and that was one of the vehicles that came up that was seen on the day around the lake at about the time of the disappearance. But the police checked out the Mustang and didn't find anything. The stepbrother, Justin's stepbrother, who had the drug record at the age of 16, was very close to a grandfather who lived in Bixby, and he had some vehicle that was investigated also.
I want to say whoever did this was close, dissected the body around that area.
The testing that was done on the dirt and the samples that were submitted to the State Crime Bureau determined that Justin was not killed where it was found.
But I think it was somewhere near there.
It could have been half a mile down the road.
Just don't see them putting these body parts in their car and the truck or whatever and just taking off down. You could get pulled over. Yeah. I just don't see that. I see it being near there.
Yeah. Well, take the Okmulgee thing, for instance. That guy last year who killed those 4 guys, dismembered them, dumped them in the river. People are like, how did he not get pulled over, in transit? And it's like, well, if you go and look, which is another reason why we love to go and look at crime scenes. If you go and look, the place that it happened is like less than a quarter of a mile from the river where it was found. It's like right there.
It's going to be...
He could have walked, really. I mean, he wouldn't have because of hauling all of the parts, but he could have. If you have a dismembered body and you're hauling it a long haul, you're going to have leaking.
Who else would know that Wayne removed the genitals from Craig Neal and so would do the same thing to Justin as part of the way to frame him?
Paul.
Paul
is the only person who knew that whole thread.
Mm-hmm. And who knows, maybe the person who did this was also sexually abused.
Oh, I'm sure.
So,
if Wayne was, then Paul probably was. Usually, that's a repeat victim offender overlap for sure There's a victim offender overlap.
I never thought about that. If that uncle who abused Wayne, he may have abused Paul when he was a little boy too.
Probably.
I'm sure, yeah. I have no doubt that Paul was probably abused.
Yeah.
Probably, which would give you even more fascination with that area for it to be removed.
Wayne built model boats out of construction paper.
Really?
When he went to prison, he became much more sophisticated and built, with his model building, built beautiful ships and cars like hot rods and Mustangs and delivery vans and all kinds of cars out of cracker boxes, match boxes, thread, toothpicks,
interesting,
straws, things like that.
So he was very artistic.
Yeah.
And Fleek made the remark, Wayne couldn't plan anything beyond a model boat.
Mm-hmm. Well, even then you can walk away from that.
He could visualize this boat, but
Yeah.
he couldn't remember what he did from one day to the next.
Yeah.
Well, and so that would tell me that when he was suffocated or his mother tried to, kill him, that what part of his brain cells were damaged. And that he kept his right brain from his left brain, and his artistic part of his brain was kept very much intact, but his logical skills were probably what were damaged.
Yeah. Before we close out this episode, I wanted you to let our listeners know how you came across this case in the first place.
Well, as I mentioned, Art Fleek and I knew each other our whole lives. And, Art had been diagnosed with cancer. He knew he was going to die, and he wanted the story to be told.
Oh. We both said that at the same time. That just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And so you're telling the story.
He died in 2017.
Oh, so that hasn't even been very long. I'm so sorry. There's a lot more to the story than you can read on the internet, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Because they don't, a lot of times I think people forget what you read on the internet and what you read, in articles is just a summation, a summary, a skimming of the story itself. There's usually so many more moving parts that you aren't
That's
aware
why
of.
when we're going to cover a case here, if there's a book on it, I'm like, that person has probably done years of research.
Yeah. Well, and thank you so much for advocating for art and for the truth and for justice.
Yeah.
I'll just mention this about Wayne's situation now that he's in prison for the rest of his life, and he's 63, I believe, something like that. The evidence in his case is in a warehouse. It's by law. In a capital case, the evidence has to be retained indefinitely. Theoretically, the blue tarp and plastic bags and all those things, the clothes that Wayne was wearing the day that Justin disappeared and all that kind of stuff is there. And he doesn't have an attorney. He can't afford an attorney. Public defenders are busy with hundreds of cases. Cops are busy with new cases, old cases, cold cases. Wayne can't get anybody to help him. He's hopeless at this point in terms of getting somebody to help him. He has handwritten several motions to see the evidence in his case, and they've all been denied, most of them on technicalities. But that evidence is sitting there. And the only thing that would really tell us what happened is for someone to get that evidence out, see if there is DNA testable evidence there, test it, compare it to Wayne, compare it to some of these other people who are still living, and even Paul, who is deceased. They could get a match with him, a DNA.
Does he have kids? Paul, does he have children?
Do genetic genealogy.
He does have children.
And they could do it through his children.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just so wild to me how many cases we talk about that could probably be solved with a single DNA test.
I know. And we realize, and people, I know that our listeners or people, they're like, just do it then.
Yeah. It costs so much money.
It costs so much money.
So much time and resources.
That's where the hang up is. And I think, I'm the same way. If I hear something, I'm like, just did it, just do it.
Yeah,
but
just do it.
It's money and resources that, a lot of police departments don't have. And so that's why advocacy for these cases are so important, because you have to bring movement. So so people will, district attorneys, people will say, okay, we need to find justice with this and really make sure that we have the right person behind bars.
Yeah.
If he didn't commit this murder, he's an innocent person behind bars.
So that's the last thing that I wanted to bring up, because I didn't want to get those emails if you're defending a child killer, here's the deal. Regardless of what crimes you commit, if you don't commit a crime, the person that committed the crime should be held responsible. Period.
And so it does not matter what you've done in the past. It doesn't matter if you've served your time and you've went and you've been, he went into Griffin Memorial, Hospital to get services. And, if you've been rehabilitated, if you've tried to rehabilitate yourself and live as a normal functioning community citizen, then you should not be just automatically convicted of someone's murder.
Is he guilty of this crime?
We have a responsibility in our justice system, if we're going to serve justice, and I'm trying to think of the right words, I can't think of the right words, but if we're going to do what we can to make sure that we are protecting and getting the right person behind bars, then we need to make sure that we do that. And I know it's not always going to be 100%, but when it's not, that's when you go back and you say, okay, there is a lot of doubt here. We need to make sure that this is correct.
Well, and you know what? If they reinvestigate it tomorrow and they find hard DNA proof that it was him, regardless, you still have answers.
You do.
It's definitive.
And then you can justify putting someone behind bars the rest of their life. What's the point of letting people rehabilitate themselves and letting people,
if you're just going to condemn them every chance that you get?
Yeah, there's no point.
That makes no sense to me.
No.
Let's rehabilitate them and then condemn them.
And we're not saying what he did as a child.
No,
we're not saying, oh yes, that's
we know
fine.
We know the weight of that. But we also know that this
is a completely
other crime is
incident.
completely separate, and it should be treated as such.
There's that, and that's exactly right. There is the answer. It should be treated as a completely separate incident.
Y'all are good at this.
Well, thank you.
We've had a
thank
little
you
bit
for
of
being
practice.
here as well.
I'm super excited about reading the book.
Yeah, I'm gonna get me a copy.
I am too.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
get the book.
Sirens Network. Here you go.
Yes.
Boom. Bye.
You've reached the end of our episode. All suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Join Raven next time on the Sirens Podcast.
Do we have an outro? That's our outro, isn't it?